when we first went virtual, within a couple of weeks, speaking to a couple of my home districts, and just we were talking about some of the systems we were doing, but also, I was saying kind of, you need to think about it because it's coming, and it's not there yet, but when it does, like, there's some things that you really got to think about.
Tell me a little bit about the Hong Kong International School, students, faculty, teachers, how it's structured.
Sure. So Dr. Dave Lovelin, I've been at Hong Kong International School for the last 3 years, and this is my 6th year overseas, originally from Oregon. So I lived and worked in Oregon my entire life before I decided to move internationally. As a school, we're about 3,000 students, K-12, and at the high school, we're about 800 students with around 80 faculty. Our school is incredibly diverse. So we have students that are from all over the world. And when you walk through the halls of our campus, it represents a world campus.
So because, where you are geographically, obviously you had to deal with the shutdown, the shift with learning structures way before we have had to in the States. So, if you could talk just a little bit about, basically like, when this started for you as a school and, what that process looked like when it was imminent that you were going to be basically having to shut down for a while.
Sure. Well, in Hong Kong, it's been an interesting year for us because we started off the year with protests in a very peaceful city typically. And in the fall, we were shut down for 5 days. And during that time, we went to asynchronous learning. And it was hard. It was a challenge. And so after we were able to come back to school from that, I asked our associate principal, Brent Braco, to pull together a team of some teachers and to plan out if we ever had to be online again, virtual, for an extended amount of time. And so they had been working on that for a few months, unaware that we were going to end up, really needing that information. And so at the end of January, when it looked like we were going to be closing, I pulled our team together on a Sunday afternoon and our admin team, and we pulled out that work and we went through it. And, some of the areas that we were debating on, it was, was synchronous, asynchronous, attendance. Do you keep the regular bell schedule? And as a team, we sat and just said, we're going to put some really hard parameters in so that we can get off the ground. I asked for one professional development day, the Monday, because it was actually up against the Chinese New Year holiday. So everybody was gone when it was announced that school was going to be closed. So that Monday, we had a professional development day. We pulled in all of our staff. They were either on campus or in Zoom, and I held a faculty meeting where we rolled out the expectations and the plan. And so within those expectations, we had what the responsibilities of our faculty were, the responsibilities of everybody on the campus, from a secretary to a custodian, and then what learning looks like moving forward, and the roles and responsibilities of our teachers, our students, and our parents. And I think putting those structures together really allowed us to jump off and continue with school as much as possible.
So I'm wondering, when you rolled all that out and you had those teams coming up with, what our structures are going to be, were those things that were already in place because of the protest prior, or were these things you just had to really kind of restructure on the fly?
Yeah, so it was a mix. So we've been using Schoology for a number of years as our LMS system, and it's been a good structure for us. And so for us, but there were some areas that we weren't as tight as we would have liked to have been. And we realized that had to be incredibly tight. Everybody's resources needed to be in the same places. Everybody's structures needed to look the same. If you have as a parent, if you have a kid in different divisions or even 2 different high schoolers, you're not going to have to try to really track what's happening. And if you're searching for stuff, it's not going to work. And so again, my associate principal, Brent, he went through everybody's pages in the school, and we gave parameters around that, that as reminders, because most of this we had in place as far as our structures goes, but then when we talk about you need to be explicit now with what the learning is going to happen, because we had about 40% of our students away from the school. So we told our community that we would maintain on Hong Kong time. And if kids were out of the country, they needed to let us know. And we would record all the Zoom sessions and they could do their learning that way, or they could dial into the course. And so for the most part, we've been hitting over 90% attendance rate still. So everybody's logging in and signing in, but also they're able to find everything. So that structure was really important. And then when we looked at, leaning on what do we want this to look like, and what we found is that just to keep some consistency for our families, and then again with kids that are traveling all over the world, for them to know that their class starts at a certain amount of time, it will run a certain way. So we were communicating out a bunch, to our families about those expectations, and also with our teachers. So it was more about kind of pulling some structures together, tightening some things down, because you had to really be prescriptive. And I think being prescriptive in the very beginning really helped us out.
So you mentioned that you had the debate about, do we do synchronous, do we do asynchronous? And how did you kind of land on the decision that you made for your structure?
So what we did in those discussions with our teachers after the fall, what we found was that it was difficult for kids to manage their home learning. So to go to an asynchronous model in a rigorous environment and keep kids moving through, you have to remember they're still kids. Even though they look like big kids and they're smart and they're articulate, they're still kids. And so making sure that we could put a structure in place where they could be successful. And I would say that we went synchronous in the beginning, and we're still synchronized. However, now, we can loosen up a little bit. Whereas, if a teacher wants to make a video, they still have a check-in in the class. The kids may watch a video. They may break out for a little bit and do some work and come back at the end. But our structures have all been put in place. And I still, in the fall, when we went to an asynchronous model, we had problems with attendance. We didn't know what kids were doing and what they weren't doing. And then when they all came back to school, we didn't know where everyone was at. And so then we had to try to cobble that together as well. So for us, we thought if we can keep as normal learning as possible, whatever that looks like, then let's try to do that and try to put a system in place for that. Our teachers are working 24 hours a day, and they're working a lot right now. And so, because you can't just take what you normally do in a classroom and just do it online, and so you have to really think about instruction and engagement, and even if you're really witty and have this great rapport with your class, when there's a screen between it, you can't have the same rapport. It's hard. So trying to work through all that with our faculty, and just we also maintain regular check-ins. We've been doing regular training. We have an ed tech coach named Hamlet Lynn, who throughout all of this, our team would sit, we were like, okay, Hamlet, we need a video on Zoom. All the tips and tricks, can you build that and send that out to our faculty and do some training? Early on with Schoology, we already had those in place, and we asked him to just pull those back out, remind everybody where they were, and with those expectations, so that we could get on the same page. So we had some people in different places that we leaned on that really helped us out.
So we have schools and districts here, obviously. When this hit us here, we had some schools and districts that were on spring break. So in a similar situation to what happened with Chinese New Year, where we already had people out and then all of a sudden that was extended. So right. Thinking about where we are, we're maybe, 2 weeks in, what advice would you have for schools and districts that are just having to think about this and about this, pretty dramatic shift?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I've noticed is there's a want to comfort everyone in a situation like this, but you have to be cautious with that. I mean, there's a balance, because you don't know how long it's going to last. And I think we in Hong Kong, we were seeing what was happening in China, and so when I started messaging out, it was supportive. But I was really careful with how we messaged around, that learning is going to be the same in a couple of weeks or anything like that. I pulled off of all that. And I think you have to think of this as a long-term situation. the idea that everything's going to be fine within a week or two, it's just not a reality. And so, and I don't know that everyone, at least some of my colleagues when I was working with, they weren't tracking that as much. And so those are some mistakes that they made early on, was saying, it'll be all right, prom will go on, it's still a month away. And you just don't know that. And so it's really hard, so I think that's one piece, is being cautious with messaging, and you have to really message a lot. I find that I'm spending, 3 times the amount of time that I normally would spend with messaging, because I want it to be really careful, as it goes out, and really thoughtful. Also, I think being aware that there's going to be highs and lows of emotions. Parents did not sign up to be teachers, and kids did not sign up to do online learning. And so for some, they thrive in this environment. For others, they're really sad and they're missing their friends. And parents, again, it's hard being a teacher, and you have to remember that you can't just hand over a curriculum and ask kids to go and expect them to not and expect them to be able to do it. I think some of the things that we did that were really successful was we maintained and increased office hours for our teachers through Zoom. Our admin team, every 2 weeks, I hold a 3-hour, 4-hour open session where parents can call in, and we just answer questions. I just do my work, and as people call in, I pause what I'm doing and kind of talk with them, and that's been really helpful. Maintaining your parent group advisory meetings. About every 2-3 weeks, I continue to have my parent group meet, and they tell me what's happening in the chat rooms and what's happening out there, and then I really try to address everything. And then ask them to one, remember that as a school, we want a supportive community, and that if people aren't behaving the way they should be in a chat room, that's part of their responsibility as being on the advisory group, to help bring those concerns to me so we can fix them. And so that's been a really nice support as well, is that our parents, when people are frustrated, they're reaching out and saying, talk to the school, don't do it in this forum. This isn't the way we communicate as a school. So those highs and lows of emotions are coming, and they come at different times for different people, different classes. I mean, we're an AP school, and so the stress around AP was very real. And now so we offered some extra AP work sessions, even though as a school we were ahead of the curriculum and students are doing really well. We offered them just as a safety net, and more, if anything else, just something to help people feel better about the situation they're in.
So you mentioned something earlier I thought was interesting, and that is you can't just do what you've done before and just do it online. Yeah. What would you say that people have learned instructionally through this process about what it means to be teaching online? What kinds of practices have you seen shift as a result?
Yeah, we've had a number of, during this time, because it's such an extended amount of time for us, we've been meeting with our teachers, as a normal observation cycle, and talking about, in this environment, what have you learned and what are you going to bring forward? How is your practice going to change because of this? Because we've learned a lot of really great things. And so, what makes sense to adjust in the future? And, things like, using Zoom as a tool to break out students into different ways. When you look at the breakout rooms with students, they're communicating and working in different ways. Our teachers pop in, and sometimes they're totally silent, and the kids are just working on a shared Google Doc. Well, the problem is that in class, if that was happening, you'd see that, and you'd go over and talk about it, right?
Right.
And so, I've asked, like one teacher was telling me about this. I says, "What are you doing?" She goes, "Well, what I've done now is that I've asked students to record their breakout sessions, and then so one person is a recorder, and then just send it to me at the end of the class." And so she goes, "Then I pop in and out, and then afterwards I can go back and just kind of touch base and see what those conversations were, and be able to move on." To be able to do entrance and exit slips in real time. They've been using the chat tools, and typically we would just do that in class. You would start out the class that way. But she said watching the students interact in a chat room as a quick check-in and also as a check-out each day, she's seen that they're answering each other really well, all the way through.
Yeah.
And so that's something she said that I'll maintain. She goes, in some form, some way, we'll maintain those chat rooms when we come back into school, because it's been a really nice check-in and check-out. I think the other thing is that really evaluating what is essential.
Mm-hmm.
There's some key pieces to your core program, right? That you have to get through. But then there's also some pieces that are just really nice to do, or maybe as a teacher, I love that unit, but we've asked for people to move those away. Make sure, strip down, get down to the basics right now, and help kids get through those. And and we got to be really supportive with how over communicate. I think we have to have a lot of individual meetings. One of the things I just asked our faculty to do is before the end of April is I want every kid to have individual meetings in every class, so they know exactly where they are. There's no surprises, and that you can give some direct feedback, and also where we're heading to, so that they know where we can get going. And I would say that as the structures of our lessons, our faculty have done an awesome job of mapping things out really well. So a kid can go on and say, okay, I know what's happening this week or next week. And a lot of the resources are in there. So for that kid that needs the control and wants to be able to jump in ahead of time, it's all there ahead of time. And for that student that maybe struggles with the organization, they don't have to be organized. They can just go to the place where it is organized. And so I think that those are things that in a day-to-day, when you see kids face-to-face, you may not lean on as much, but those have been really, really good for us.
So you also talked about, the giving of work of synchronous versus asynchronous. Would you say that when students are having to work at home online, and in some cases self-directed, is it taking them longer to do things? Like I've heard online teachers say less is more. Has that been your experience as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. And actually what we've asked our faculty to do is that when they do assign work, make sure they put a time on it, so what it's supposed to be,
Okay.
and then if it is supposed to be 30 minutes and it's taking a kid an hour and a half, to make sure you're checking in with your class so that they tell you that. And our kids are really good about that, because they're used to it. But I think that was, in the beginning, one of the things we did early on, which I think was also really, really, really good, was we every week to 10 days, we sent out a survey to our students and our parents about online learning and struggles, how's it going, all those kinds of things. The miss was, as a school, is that we didn't start doing that with our faculty until about 3 or 4 weeks down the road. So we should have done it at the same time. Going back, that's something that I would urge all school districts to do, and do in kind of two different ones. You have one that is just talking about the learning and the systems and what it looks like and what are those struggles. And then you're also, the other piece is talking about the wellness of students and wellness of teachers and families. And so, but those are really important to keep track of as you go through this. But when, looking at time, right in the very beginning, I would receive feedback from parents saying, my student is spending 6 hours a day at school, doing homework, 6 hours a day doing homework. And I had to remind our families that, typically that happens at school, and so we have to reshift, we have to shift our mindsets a little bit. What we ask to our faculty to do is that if you typically have homework, work to embed it into the classroom time. The last thing you want is a kid to be online for 6 hours and then doing another 3 hours online afterwards. So the screen time is a real challenge. This last week, I followed suit of our middle school did this a few weeks ago, and we did a non-digital day on Wednesday. And I asked teachers not to assign any work. I asked students to go use the day for themselves to get organized, to go for a walk, to read a book, but turn off the tech. And it was good for our faculty and our students. And so I think that all came out of those surveys. I saw that people were struggling. Our spring break is coming up this week, and I didn't know that we were going to make it. So getting everybody that break was really, really important.
So do you have kids, David, at home?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
I have a 7 and 9-year-old.
So, because you mentioned the parent component, and you're
Yeah,
obviously a parent, and you're having to also, you know, manage the online learning as well.
yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how you made parents aware of some of these changes, and what kinds of, do you have to train them? How did you help get them acclimated to this new kind of world we're living in?
Yeah, and I think it's different at each age. I would say that our elementary schools have done a really great job here. They've put together learning grids that have
Okay.
all of the information for the week on there. They've in the beginning they were asynchronous, and then now they do. My kids are doing about one or two, well, probably 2 or 3 Zoom calls a week now with teachers, whether it's in reading groups or different things. And so in the beginning, for high school students, they actually did pretty well up front, and more than anything else, I heard the concerns of parents. They were just afraid of, does this mean that my kid doesn't get credit for the year
Right.
because they're in school? What is APs going to look like? What about college applications? And so
Mhm.
trying to talk through, so every week I send out, we, as a school, we send out communication,
Mhm.
and we had those trips, those interim trips, and we had to cancel those. And so refunds on over $13 million in Hong Kong dollars, of these trips. And so trying to manage all of those pieces, the communication and regular communication has been critical. And then hearing from parents, when I started doing some of the Zoom sessions, I had parents get on just because they felt like they needed to know what Zoom is and how it worked. And so I
Yeah.
had some parents get on and say, I really don't have any questions. I just felt like I'm out of the loop, that everybody knows how Zoom is working, and I need to know how it works. And so we were doing some of that. But I think that what really helped is sending out some trainings early on that were, uh, that our ed tech coach did, for our students. And what's really interesting now is, for middle school, high school students, you have parents working from home,
Mhm.
and across the table they're listening to class. And so when we share with our faculty members, we said, this is a very interesting, new world we're about to go into, because your parents are now in your class with you.
Right.
And so everything that happens within a class, they now are seeing it all,
Right.
the good and the bad. And
Yeah.
so it's been an interesting dynamic that way. And I think that there's been a new appreciation, I think, for what it is,
Yeah.
in that world. But I think that having times that are open to help train parents, I know that with my own kids, um, there's times where we're trying to manage. My wife, for sure. My wife's also a school nurse, and
Mhm.
so she's been helping manage with our kids, and I've been doing the same. But where she's like, okay, I don't know how to get, where's the Zoom link? I can't find the Zoom link. And so she just messages teachers. The teachers are really responsive. And I think the key though is that our faculty right now are on from 7:30 to 4. That they are available and they're on it, whether they're teaching from home or on our campus. And so it's okay if something's slipping or falling apart, because I can always get a hold of them. And I
Yeah.
think that's a really important thing.
So we're almost out of time. Is there anything else that you would, either like lessons learned, like you mentioned one thing you would have done differently is surveying teachers when you were surveying your students. Is there anything else that you would have approached differently looking back?
Yeah, for sure. We have my other associate principal, Lauren Fine. She works with student life, so she's been working with student council in our ambassador programs,
Oh.
and about a month ago, maybe 6 weeks ago, they started doing. It was coming across in the surveys that our students were sad more than anything else. They were handling the school part, but they were sad, and some parents were letting kids go outside, other parents weren't. And so it was trying to manage some of that. But so our students came together in those leadership groups and started doing daily challenges, to kids. And like, take a picture of your lunch today, here's an open Zoom session for everybody during break. Or they just did a tic-tac-toe this week, of things that they've experienced. But they're doing a really great job of these challenges to
Yeah.
try to just bring our kids together.
Yeah.
We usually have a really interactive campus. It's a
Yeah.
fun school.
Yeah.
And how do you bring that together and not lose that? I think that's also a piece that's very different, is that when you sign up for online school,
Mhm.
you don't expect to have assemblies or to do homerooms, and you sign up for classes,
Right.
right? And those classes a lot of times are self-directed with some instruction or some pieces of communication with maybe with a group of people or not.
Yeah.
In this environment, we're trying to keep our school a cohesive community,
Yeah.
and it's different. And so we're continually trying to figure out ways to do that. And that's with keeping the well-being of our families, including our faculty, in mind. And so having somebody with a lens to that can really continue to look at that has been really important. And I think it'll get lost because, you know, one of the things I am concerned about with some of my own family in Oregon is with a couple of the school districts, they've been given a couple of packets of work for a couple of weeks. And so that's going to end soon. So then what's next, right? Is it going to be online? Is it not going to be online? But regardless, now you're going to be dealing with grief of your kids, and as parents, the stress of trying to manage your finances and work and your kids' schooling. And the minute that your kids' schooling takes a dip, you have this huge guilt associated with it, and you know that I'm not doing what I'm supposed to for my kid. And so having the school kind of really try to wrap their hands around everybody and try to give outlets for communication, but also some outlets for fun, you know, because it's a really serious situation, so you don't want to make light of it, but at the same time, the emotional well-being of everyone in this is really important.
Well, I can't thank you enough, David, for taking some time to share what you've learned. And, you know, it's what an incredible time that we're in. I mean, it's fascinating, and I can't imagine what it's been like for 9 weeks. And so letting us be able to share some of this with our community is incredibly important. So I just want to thank you for that, and thank you for taking time out of your morning to share those things with us.
Yeah, no problem. Actually, one last thing I wanted to share with you, and I don't know do you mind if I take the screen for a moment?
No, not at all.
So I'm gonna grab a desktop here, and one of the things we did early on, and I think that this would be really important for schools to do, is that we created a virtual learning group. And so from day one, we put all of our resources and expectations in here, and we've been gathering and sharing out exemplars as well, both from other schools, but also from our own. And so, you know, we created, and this has been shared out to all of our faculty, and it's also we've been sharing it out to other schools. But, you know, effective lessons, how to do summatives, what virtual learning looks like, and then our policy and guidelines that we continue to send out. But creating a landing page for everybody that we keep directing to has been a really good thing.
Oh, that's a fantastic thing to share. And I'm wondering, David, is there any way, I mean, are any of these resources publicly available that we could, you know, share with the greater community, or?
Yes. So just when we're done, send me an email and I can give you links to that information. We've been working to try to make everything public as well.
Yeah.
So what we're trying to do is make sure that any student information is pulled off of it. And so that's all we've been just making sure, because this has been an internal document.
Yeah. Well, I'm noticing that someone shared these virtual lesson plan templates into our public resources area.
Yes.
So we can absolutely, we'll make sure we highlight that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, so we just did that in the last couple of weeks. So we made sure that these were all good to go. And so, but you know, having schools do this stuff, and also I would say that if any school is wants to talk, you know, me and my team, we're available. And we've been sharing different resources, and in the international community, we've all been sharing since day one. And so, you know, I've been hosting a couple different webinars with different schools around Asia, where we are just sharing our struggles and, you know, kind of, you know, the decisions behind synchronous, asynchronous, so that people can make their decisions. So,
No, this is fantastic.